part 3, which is my second last part, and before I try and wind down as I slow down. 2 principal questions. Question 1. What are we doing with the legacy left by Moshoeshoe the First? Question 2. And instead of just eulogizing Moshoeshoe's legacy, probably just as I am doing now, how best can we live by it, die in it, or with it? To answer these 2 tough questions, I propose a 2-pronged attack, revisiting the idea of a philosopher-king and decolonizing knowledge through a program of rehumanization, remembering, and re-education of the African child. The idea of a philosopher-king was very current, and it simply says that a philosopher-king is supposed to be an embodiment of justice, law, and wisdom. These 3 were supposed to be wedged into one. And that if these 3 are wedded into one, then the happiness of mankind would be assured. The biblical Solomon, seen as the nexus of law and wisdom in 1 Kings chapters 1 to 11, was seen as a philosopher-king who was not only wise, but who rendered justice throughout his reign and lived according to the law of Yahweh. If we agree that the world is in trouble today, it is because it lacks philosopher-kings. And we need to sing, to say, seek ye first the philosopher-king, and all else will follow. This, I submit, will take us out of the intensive care unit. Rehumanization and remembering of the African child. I say here, 1, we need to recapitalize and invest in education. Disinvestment in education, and especially higher education, has been a major problem on the African continent. During the high moment of structural adjustment programs in Africa, the World Bank told the vice chancellors of African universities gathered in Harare in 1986 that Africa did not need universities. This was resisted, and the World Bank changed track and resorted to conditionalities. Allow me 1 second. Over a 20-year period, and with chilling efficiency, Lesotho's 21st century rulers have presided over a consistently and persistently falling subvention to NUL. This can only perpetuate coloniality of knowledge, because global coloniality wants uneducated citizens that it can exploit as cheap labor. Moshoeshoe the First loved knowledge, and if he was around, he would have presided over a healthy and rising subvention to NUL and all institutions of learning in Lesotho, tangential to inflation, personnel costs, and massification, not the other way around. Ladies and gentlemen, the best monument we can erect in honor of Morena Moshoeshoe is to educate his progeny by making education free and accessible. In a statement released by AFDEL on 19 March 2021, Moshoeshoe's progeny cried. AFDEL noted with great concern the limited reference to higher education in the budget speech of the fiscal year 2021-2022. This occurs in the context of an already small and underdeveloped higher education sector. With 4 of its main institutions, NUL, Lesotho College of Education, Lincoln University of Science and Technology, and Lerotodi Polytechnic. The university in Africa is in a deep crisis because of merchants of capitalism who have turned it into a marketplace. When did it become a market? And since when did higher education become a private good? The short answer is, since the arrival of those who were previously removed from the family of human beings. The second idea is to return to the base, what Ngugi calls a return to the base. This simply talks about regrounding education in our knowledges, in our cultures, in our values, in our spiritualities, what he calls remedying vital absences. And this is what we need to do. But above all, he says, this depends on the willingness of the government Government policy is very, very important. Do we have a deliberate government policy to do this? I know not. We need to change the content for what is taught. At independence, many African universities embarked on a series of curriculum reforms. Sadly, these reforms changed the exoskeleton of the curriculum, but left the soft and sensitive parts, the endoskeleton, untouched. This is the software of European memory, which I have already talked about, and which Ngugi said, download European memory into Africans. This is what we are doing with our kids in those primary schools. Walk into any African university, the epistemological canon is in the hands of white males of 5 Western countries: Britain, France, Germany, the USA, and Italy. If this is still the geography and biography of knowledge today, then it is not surprising that our curriculum still teaches the African child that black means death and white means virtue, that black hair is dull, is dry, damaged, frizzy, and dull, and that white hair is fine, flat, and normal, according to that September 2020 Clicks advert. Knowledge masquerading as the global knowledge economy continues to radiate from the hegemonic center. The marginalization of African scholarship needs urgent attention, and one practical solution is to shift the geography and biography of knowledge. Unless we do this, nothing will change. Ladies and gentlemen, if the school system is faulty, its products are faulty, resulting in this miseducation of the African child. A chicken cannot produce a duck egg because the system itself was produced by a chicken egg and can only produce what produced it. If the problem is miseducation, the solution is re-education. We cannot use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. We all know this. The entire colonial tradition of education teaches us to trust Western experts and to distrust ourselves and our own knowledges, as we have seen in this COVID world in terms of creating and finding a cure and treatment to this disease. We are all looking up to the world. This is epistemic or knowledge or cognitive dependence. Miseducation is very dangerous at 2 levels. First, it produces arrogance, which goes against decolonial pedagogy, which destroys the spirit of care and love. Many of us are very arrogant. Second, it leads to conservatism in the delivery of content in terms of method. Woodson says, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. When you determine what a man shall think, you do not have to concern yourself about what he will do. In the Republic of South Africa, we have this, what is called mathematics education, which has become a gatekeeper and a major hurdle to degree completion. At NUL, we have the same. We have what is known as M1330, ST1381, which has held its stranglehold for graduation for mainly students in the humanities and social sciences. I can also tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that in those deep, winding, beautiful gorges and mountains of Lesotho lie beautiful, winding, and fascinating histories of life, stories of chemistries, geographies, economics, music, physics, and the like, waiting to be excavated and told. Stories informed by the traditions, cultures, practices, and knowledge of the people, our knowledges, our histories, our past, and our lived experiences, the everyday. Teaching Moshoeshoeism, ladies and gentlemen, is something that is very key to me. And I argue that if the exploits of Mr. Rhodes and many other robbers and imperialists and colonialists, became the subject of scholarly inquiry taught in every school, and the fascination of many Western scholars, why should we, the sons and daughters of Moshoeshoe the First in Africa, not be fascinated by a peace-loving individual like Moshoeshoe the First? Mutlatsi Tavani suggested that in inscribing Moshoeshoe the First's name, and I quote, even only in the preamble, in the hope that this might target the consciences of rulers who perpetuate evils, such as unequal distribution of the country's wealth, political insecurity, etc., against society. Imagine Moshoeshoe sitting around a table with the so-called celebrated philosophers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, Voltaire, and the like. From what I have already demonstrated, Moshoeshoe would be able to enter into deep conversations with them and argue even probably better than them. And I can tell you that nothing separates Moshoeshoe from all these Western celebrated philosophers, and especially Socrates, the founder of Western philosophy. Both Moshoeshoe and Socrates never published anything. What we know about Socrates was published by his students, the most devoted of them being Plato. Why should we not publicize Moshoeshoe's philosophies as well? We can raise Moshoeshoe the first to the same heights by teaching, researching, writing, and publishing his philosophies in all major languages of the world in the same way as those of Socrates were publicized. To do this is to liberate our kids from Euro-American-centric modernity by studying their own heroes and heroines. Consciousness of teachers, more often than not, we blame students. Yet, our education system is clogged with teachers and academics produced by Western-style training colleges and universities, all of them suffering from miseducation. We can debate about who should teach and what should be taught and the like. We can talk about that. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen. My conclusion is based on that. What does Lesotho and the world need now and most? If Lesotho and the world are in the intensive care unit today, it is because it lacks the knowledge of Moshoeshoe the first. Seek ye first the knowledge kingdom, and all else will be added. Moshoeshoe sought knowledge first, and the rest followed. Generosity, peace, leadership, as we have already seen, were all added because of knowledge. A new board of knowledge is now needed to serve and carry Lesotho and the world into the future. Knowledge saved nationhood. Knowledge must save Lesotho and the world. If Lesotho and the world are in the intensive care unit today, it is because it lacks the love of Moshoeshoe. Yet still, to love requires knowledge. In his autobiography, Mandela observes, if people can learn to hate, they can learn and be taught to love. Mandela's ethical leadership style was inspired by Moshoeshoe. 4 days after being released from prison in 1890, he told Max Dupree that, open quote, people will praise me by following in the footsteps of a man who taught me everything. If loving and hating are epistemic creations, changing the knowledge project and content will automatically change everything. Lesotho and the world must begin to learn to love. We must start by loving thy neighbor loving thy neighbor, and thy neighbor loving thy neighbor, until love turns pandemic. Until and unless love turns pandemic, there will never be peace and happiness in this world. Moshoeshoe is a gift to the entire humanity because he had the wisdom, knowledge, and courage to love and make peace under social and political conditions that did not permit love and peace.